Hey,
Thank you for joining me.
so good.
So, we met earlier this week. We don't really know each other. And let me just explain for people that might be listening to this episode for the first time that I'm John Miller. I lead, what am I? The VP of programs at the Data Management Association of Los Angeles. And we started this podcast to interview interesting people, share some of their lessons learned and get to know them a little bit so that we can all share in the data community how to think about things. So that's me. And my guest is Linda Powell. Linda, why don't you introduce yourself? And
Sure, sure. Thanks for having me on today.
yeah,
These are always fun, and we had a great pre-conversation, so I think it'll be a lot of fun. I'm Linda Powell. I've been working in data management in the financial industry longer than I like to admit. And my career has spanned both the federal space. I spent most of my career with the Federal Reserve, which is a wonderful place to work. And I've also worked for a couple of other agencies. And I spent the latter part of my career at both Citibank and Bank of New York doing data governance and data management. All of which have been great fun jobs. So now I'm doing a little consulting here and there and figuring out what are the rest of the joys in life.
yeah, no, that's good. Me too. I have been in the data space my whole career, not as distinguished as you, Linda. But what I love about your background is that there's so many of us who have had long, rich careers, and some of us at the beginning of our career that just have no knowledge or a very limited knowledge of the kinds of worlds that you've been part of and how you've seen data governance and data management evolve. And you've done it at the highest level in government and you've done it in banks. So you got all kinds of experience that hopefully people will find I will get to and we will explore. I want to make sure folks know that if you're listening and listening to the live broadcast, you can ask questions in the chat. I'll look at that time to time and we'll make sure that your questions get asked and maybe even answered. So, how do we want to get started on this Friday?
Well, let's just jump right in.
Okay.
When we first started chatting, you said, "What do you want to talk about?" And I said, "Well, do you want to talk about leadership or you want to talk about something technical?" And you guys said, "Let's go technical." So
Yeah.
we
I
thought
love
we
it.
would talk about data provenance and data lineage because it's Friday afternoon. It's beautiful outside here. What could be more exciting than
No,
data
dude.
provenance and data lineage?
Well, no, Linda, you say that jokingly, but listen, for me and people that know how excited I get about this area, it is exciting. And it is a cool topic, and we'll bring it all together because now we live in a time of AI.
Oh, yeah.
You know, we've all been preaching data governance principles if we've been doing it a long time. For a very long time, we all know that data is the foundation for AI. We're all now learning that AI can help us do data management better. So
Mhm.
we're at a very interesting time. And when I think of your experience, what I like is that I hope startup founders and people that are new in their career get to hear how you think about Lineage and Provenance. Because here in San Francisco or in LA, when we're in the AI community, we they they want to learn more. So Provenance, Lineage, why don't you start by defining them and we'll go from what are they and then why they're important.
Yeah, so I'm gonna say for the average person, they're
Oh my God, is there an earthquake
oh, no.
where you are?
Oh, sorry.
We
Um,
get lots of earthquakes here in
no,
California, so
I'm
tuck
just
and
living
yeah,
on shaky ground.
okay,
So people often think about providence and lineage as the same thing. And for
right.
most purposes, they're extraordinarily similar. Provenance is really where does the data come from? And lineage is what is the path that the data has gone through. You think about that, there's a lot of overlap there. I like to think about it as provenance is if I hand you a glass of water and you say, where did it come from? You're hoping I say the kitchen sink, not the toilet.
Right.
That's knowing where did the water actually come from. But if we talk
Yeah.
about the lineage, I might tell you what pipes it's gone through, but you're not
Right.
quite sure if it's the kitchen sink or the bathroom toilet.
Er, I love okay, now
You'll know even
do
more about, like, has the water been filtered and what was the
yeah.
filtration calculation if I give you the lineage, but you may not know the origin of it. So that's the big distinction. For the most part, you use lineage to find out what is the origin or the provenance. Sometimes you know one, not the other, but you look at it all together holistically. So that's the starting point is figuring out what do I need to know? Do I need to know the path things are taking, or do I need to know where did it actually originate from? And you might think, of course, I always want to know exactly where did it originate from, but maybe you don't. So in these big banks, there you could have 20 loan systems. If you're dealing with a money center banks who has gobbled up lots of other banks over the years and they haven't integrated into a single loan system, their provenance is going to be all of the individual loan systems, but then they need to put it all in one place so that people can actually use it. Because what exactly you're collecting in the individual systems and the formats of the data are going to be slightly different. So you need to put it all in an authoritative location. And so I know I may not need to know the provenance of a specific loan data set, but I need to know that it's starting from the authoritative data source. I may not need to know if it comes from loan application A or loan application B. So that's where knowing the lineage is really critical. I know where I'm getting the data from, what pipelines is it going through, and what transformations is it taking along the way. And as long as I'm getting it from a good, reliable source, like I know that the water in my Brita, in my
Yes.
refrigerator, always comes from the kitchen sink. I don't
Right.
ever have to worry about that. So I don't have to ask the question of did that come from the toilet? I know it came from the kitchen sink. So that's my Brita's my authoritative source for my water. And in the big banks, what they've been doing is making sure that they have authoritative sources and that people are using those authoritative sources to get to their reporting and analytics. Because that's at the end of the day, it's reporting and analytics that people need.
Listen, Linda, I think I'm glad we recorded that. And I feel bad that I interrupted at the beginning because I think the quality of your analogy is so good that I love it. It's so and it's because we can communicate that to any human being on the planet. We all now know how to think about provenance and separate that from the pipes and the lineage.
Yep.
So, oy vey. I guess we can wrap it up now. We're done.
All right. All right.
You've
Well, thanks
solved.
so much for having me.
Yeah, it's great. Okay, so and you've included in that a great example of the why this is so important. Now, we're all data professionals. Let's go down another level and let's talk about some stories maybe we have about what you've seen. You
Yeah.
know, you've seen a lot. You've seen it all.
Yep.
Okay, so have some fun. You know, I
Sure.
know you're not at those banks or departments anymore, so maybe you have the freedom to tell some fun stories for us to hear what you've seen.
Well, I'll tell a fun story from the news that I don't know if
Okay.
everybody has heard. So, my first favorite fun story, and this shows the importance of data provenance when you're using AI.
Yeah.
Everybody loves AI. I love AI. It's a great tool. It makes everything go so much faster, but we have to remember that garbage in, garbage out, even if it's faster, is still garbage. So there was a bunch of researchers that made up a disease, and I looked this up again, and it was I don't know if I can pronounce it. It's bionymia, and it was some sort of a rash. But they published several fake studies about bioxanemia and put in like really obvious clues that it was a fake study. Like one of them
Right.
talked about the researchers at the Starfleet Academy and on
Right.
the USS Enterprise, and, like blatant. This,
Yeah.
if you were reading it, you would have thought, "Is this The Onion?"
Right.
So
I love it.
really, really blatant. And I think it only took about 6 months or so for
Oh
that
my
to
god.
start popping up on things like, I'll say WebMD. I don't know if it did show up on WebMD.
Sure.
Well, people Google and use ChatGPT to, "I've got a rash. What could it possibly be?"
Right.
And it started showing up as an answer. This
Nice.
bioanemia, bioxanemia, or something.
Sure.
And so people were calling their doctors like, "Oh, I think I have bioxanemia." And it just proved how quickly, if you put bad information into your information infrastructure, then you're going to get garbage out.
Yeah, yeah.
Versus there's some new medical applications I was reading about that doctors are starting to use for AI for diagnoses, but they're
Right.
really careful about the sources. They're
Right.
they're only training the models off of textbooks and known, legitimate publications and studies to help doctors with their diagnoses. So I'm all in for
Yeah.
doctors, being smarter and having more information, and, "Oh, maybe I would have never thought of that myself, but
Right.
I'll explore it now." If the provenance of the information is actually verified and carefully curated, you
Yeah.
can these tools can be amazing. If you're just running it against some version of the internet, you're gonna get garbage. We
Listen.
all read all sorts of like, "Really? Is that true?"
Yeah. No, I
Internet and under any kind of topic, so
well, listen, and this is not we don't wanna get into the philosophical, or, debates about what is knowledge and how do we accumulate it and, this the library science point of view, but, because it's not my area of expertise, and what you point out is so relevant that I want us to figure out how we can tell this story in a business context, right? Because we are all dealing with this, but the terminology you use about the authoritative
Mhm,
source, right? And, I've been doing data management for a long time, data engineering, and I thought, oh, well, I've got Lineage. So I've solved the problem. I've added instrumentation of along my pipeline. I must be doing it right. And that's before I learned about the concept of reference data and
mhm,
systems of truth
uh-huh,
and authoritative sources. And I just think that we have to be able to cite and cite's probably the wrong word. Let
yeah,
me not, but cite the provenance of that fact,
mhm,
and I know this is an area that is become exceptionally important as we use information that comes from AI, whether it's been trained on the internet or trained on a corpus that's specific
mhm,
to a domain. Somehow that's snuck in,
mhm.
right? And so I love that.
Yeah. So I think about the importance of data lineage and ultimately provenance in terms of everywhere I've ever worked, and probably
Yeah,
most of the people I know in my life get information in some way. They get a report via
right,
email weekly. And if you ask them, "Oh, where did that data come from?"
right.
A lot of people can't tell you. They're like,
Yeah,
"Oh, I got it from Joe." Well, where did Joe pull it? Oh, Joe pulled it off of a PowerPoint deck that
right.
he saw.
Yeah,
Or And so it's, well, how old was the PowerPoint deck? You're putting today's date on that. Oh, that was a 3-year-old PowerPoint deck.
Right.
So unless you know where you're getting it, you don't really know if it's correct. You don't know if it's fit for purpose, if it's actually meeting what you need it to do. Chances are, I'm gonna, do a wild guess. In my experiences, 80, 85, maybe 90% of the time, the data's fine. You're getting it from a reliable source. Joe's a reliable source. He
Yeah.
knows what he's doing. He puts it in a spreadsheet. He emails it to you once a month. Maybe once in a while he makes a little typo. That's a human error, and that's a different solution that we could talk about a different day about automating
Yeah.
manual processes. But where did Joe get the information? Did he just download a report off of the
Right.
authoritative source? Probably. But if you
Yeah.
don't know that, you don't
Yeah.
know that your data is fit for your purpose. So I
Yeah.
think we all know people who get information and they just don't know where it's coming from.
Right.
But they assume
Well,
it's right.
and okay, so let's have some fun with that
Okay.
because, and let's take the PowerPoint example and this fictitious Joe we're
Yeah.
talking about
Poor Joe.
because yeah,
If any Joe that I've ever worked with is thinking that
uh,
I'm talking about him, I'm not.
yeah, yeah. And if it was Joanne, she would never make these mistakes, but
No,
it's
Joanne.
Joe for, okay. So when you enter a new organization, you come in as the chief data officer. You don't know who's Joe and who are all the other people,
Yeah.
right? And so that not knowing that, and I find it weird to call it tribal knowledge, but that intrinsic or that buried information about who are those authoritative sources when you enter a new organization. What are the authoritative systems? How
Mhm.
have they changed over time? Is it still authoritative? But those are all questions we've asked before and
Yeah.
we could talk about, but I want to talk about Joe's PowerPoint because this is a thing I was working with the banker, actually my not a banker, an investor and a asset manager. He hates being called a banker, but even worse, he hates being called an accountant. So we won't
Yeah.
call him any of those
Well, there's
things.
nothing wrong with either.
I know, I know. Anyway, he's a brilliant man. And we were talking about the provenance of documents. And we looked at a prospectus document. Okay, here's a prospectus. We've downloaded it off the UK government website. So it is as authoritative
Official
as the
government document. Okay.
so it's and there's a bunch of dates. And Joe used that to create a report. Now, in that document, it says, well, we had a forecast at this we made a forecast 3 years ago, and we had a forecast 2 years ago, and we wanna do another forecast of the counterfactual of if COVID hadn't happened. And so suddenly, when the complexity of the question gets to that degree, the question is, "Well, dude, do I go to the PowerPoint? Do I go to the government source?" And the fun part for me is in all of this is how do you represent all of that information about the provenance and the lineage of
That's
those doc? Because that's
that's
the
the
hair.
fun part in there. So let me
Yeah.
just rephrase. I'm
Yeah.
using data from two different data points from
Yeah.
a government record, and I'm extrapolating
Yeah.
what if COVID had never happened. There's
Right.
some sort of formula or calculation I'm
Yeah.
using in there to get my third answer. That should capture in the lineage.
Exactly.
Because I know where I'm getting it. I know what the current number is, but I'm going to take the prior number, maybe the current number, and do some sort of formulaic calculation to
Yeah.
create a third number. That's my lineage. I'm going to show where I'm getting all my numbers, the calculation that I'm actually doing, and how I'm outputting it. And without knowing that calculation,
Yes.
then you don't know if you've got the right number. Because I can always go back and, well, I don't really like the standard deviation that they
Yeah.
show.
Yeah.
You you could, one of my favorite stories, and I'll go off topic slightly because
Of course.
one of my big beliefs is with AI. we all need to become incredible skeptics. We
Correct.
need to be massive skeptics. Your intuition may not be right, but it may not be wrong.
Yeah.
So one of my favorite stories, long before AI, I think long before we even had data scientists, I was working with some statisticians on a project, and they came up with this conclusion. I don't even remember what the result was. And they're like, here's the answer, Linda. And I was like, I don't think so. And they're like,
Right.
they all got very angry with me. Linda, it's math. Just because you don't understand the math doesn't mean it's not right. And I was like, yeah,
Ooh.
but it just doesn't feel right. And so turned out it wasn't right. But I couldn't tell them why until I went
Right.
back and got my master's in quantitative finance. And then I understood the math and I understood the modeling and I understood the statistics behind it. And there were some assumptions
Yeah.
it was an assumption and the assumption was wrong. So the result was wrong. But before I had the mathematical background, I couldn't tell them why their answer was wrong. But I didn't believe that it was right. And I think most of us are intimidated by, Linda, you just don't understand the math.
Oh, I
You're
hate
an
that.
idiot.
So condescending and like,
But
dude,
but but it's, and they had a right to be because I didn't understand the math and I
yeah,
couldn't tell them why it was wrong. But I think we all need to be big skeptics now. Just because you don't understand what's happening in the box
yeah, yeah, yeah.
doesn't mean that the box is always going to be right. We have to still ask the hard questions. And when I talk to people right out of college and they're like, oh, with AI, what should I be doing? I was like, we're going to need people to understand the math and the
Yeah.
statistics in these boxes. That's going to be the value of people in the future. And I'll just relate it back to Lineage
Yeah, yeah. Please.
is understanding what's happening in these models and capturing that in the lineage and being able to validate that is what's
Yeah.
going to be critical, because I know until I studied the math, I didn't get it. I just had a feeling that the answer didn't feel right.
Okay. Linda, I love it. That is a perfect example. And now let me throw a curveball in there. So Claude, we're not advocating anybody's foundation model and blah, blah, blah. But Claude did some cool stuff, or Anthropic did, and
Yeah.
released some finance capabilities. And if you've used it in a spreadsheet, you realize, oy vey, I actually maybe don't need the quantitative finance degree to at least
Hmm.
ask the right question.
Yep.
So, and this goes to what all of these startups, including mine, are trying to do is, so I don't want you to have a quantitative finance degree. However, I want to show you how it was calculated with sufficient detail so that you or a quantitative finance person, they can attest to it. But if you're the portfolio manager, you just want to know that it is true. And so
Hmm.
when you think about this problem, or when I think about this problem, I think about it, well, the calculation is a model. It's a financial
Hmm.
model. It runs with, and it has assumptions and it has formulas and etc. But it also has vintages, right? You
Hmm.
know, hey, we did
Yeah.
it this way, then we changed the model, but then we also changed the parameters or the inputs to the
Hmm.
model when, right? So I've added a couple of layers of complexity to how where we were, and I think it's my guess that we're all going to have to be able to pull that string and say,
Yeah.
well, what model? What
Yep.
version of the model? What assumptions? Because right now, we're taking experts and we're just pretending they all, well, but we're not pretending. There's somehow AI has allowed us to use that expertise but not to understand it. And I think it's kind of on us, and this is my soapbox. It's kind of on us to teach people how to pull the strings and or pull or open the layers of the onion, peel back the layers to see.
Yeah.
And so I just wonder, teach me how you think about that.
And I think of it through skepticism. 100%. Just be skeptical of all of the information that you're given. And it's also important to remember that a model is generally an estimate. When I was in grad school, my one
Say it.
the best lessons that I learned, and I think I was the only one in the class who appreciated the lesson, everybody else was really mad, is we got a question about what's the beta, and everybody answered, oh, it's the stock price. And we
Yeah,
all failed. It's not the stock price, it's the estimate of the stock price with a
brilliant.
standard deviation. And we had all sort of bought into the econometrics so much that we were like, well, of course, that's the right answer. No, no, it's a guess based on
Well,
historical information. It's a guess. And for me, I was like, oh, wow, that was actually a really powerful lesson
yeah, yeah,
behind that test, which I hate to admit, but I have never forgotten that because I
exactly.
was starting to think, well, that's the answer. It's not the answer. And we have to remember that just because a model gives us an answer doesn't mean the model's capturing all of the possible parameters, all of the possible information, or that all of the information it's being fed is correct. We have to just be skeptical.
Well, so I worked for a highly reputable data science for a long time ago. And data scientists, and this is a decade ago, and they're they are designed, the classical term, the
Yep.
research data scientist, not the data analyst, but they are so skeptical. And you're absolutely right. That's what they would say.
Yeah.
But, but, and as a teacher, I think that's my role in life. There's a teaching moment for everything. And I think we need, or I would like to help others understand how to be skeptical. You know what I mean?
Mm.
And because you have so much experience, you say, and this is not a critique, this is an opportunity. I think you're in your consulting business could teach us all how to understand how to be skeptical with AI at the level that we're talking about. And I think and I'm thinking out loud, but
Mhm.
actually I want you to interview our startup, our founder, and I think you in a 30-minute qualification call could probably convince my co-founder that we need the Linda Powell or a Linda Powell
You need a skeptic.
to, yeah, to be the
Everyone
skeptic.
needs a skeptic in their life.
I know. And so when we think about AI and we think about what we're all doing here, I think it's our job as people who've been around the block, seen it all, to teach that how to be skeptical and how to look into the next layer or however you want to frame it. So yeah,
Yeah,
I love it.
I think we need to just treat these models like we would any other person. Like we
Right.
would treat a person. If I went to my boss with something that didn't sound quite right, he would be like, I don't think so, Linda. Go back. Do it
Yeah.
again. Run the numbers again. Even if I was right, I would have to prove that I was right. I think we're too quick to accept it came from something I don't fully understand.
Yep.
It came from a black box, so I don't know how to question it, so I'm not going to question it. And it's taking the risk of looking stupid. I looked really stupid when I was arguing with the statisticians, because they had, they had their PhDs and I didn't,
Right.
and I couldn't tell them why I didn't agree.
Yeah. Yeah. No. And
You have to be willing to take that chance sometimes of not looking
I know. Well,
right.
and it's so hard, or at least it's so much easier for me now, 30 years in, to be able to say, well, I don't know what you're talking about. And let's have some fun and explore how
Yeah.
you arrived at that. And so for me, it's now just it's an unbelievable fun journey. Now, before we go on,
Mhm.
I see a question that
Ah,
I haven't been able to get to. And before we do the question, let me just do a plug for the DAMA Los Angeles DAMA Days on Friday, October 9th in Los Angeles at Loyola Marymount University. And we have a full day of stimulating discussions with industry thought leaders. And if anybody that's listening to this wants to join us, you register at damala.org. So that's DAMA or DAMALA.org. Okay, so that's my first ad. So I'm not sure.
I'm going to put in a second plug for DAMA because early on in my career, I was doing data before people even knew what the word metadata meant.
Yeah.
And I'm going to say a very large portion of what I know today,
Yeah.
I learned through the data community, going to in Dataversity and going to the DAMA conferences. Incredibly great way to learn the depth and the breadth of data management.
Thank you, Linda. I want to use that in our plug. We'll
And you
probably.
didn't pay me for that.
I know. I know. It's we'll put you on
Now,
your head on the
it's
website.
a true statement.
Yeah, yeah.
I have not been to a DAMA conference in a number of years, but early on in my career, I went every year and came back with a wealth of information and
Uh,
applied it immediately to wherever I was working.
exactly.
Mhm.
When you go into a room and you can take away one thing, even just one thing, and then apply it tomorrow,
Yeah,
you've won.
yeah,
And I agree. I've found the same thing, and it's just incredible. So
yeah.
let's talk about an incredible question because
Okay.
I love that there's a bunch of the community in Los Angeles that are asking great questions. And let me just read it aloud. The Heidi question is for you, obviously not me. We always prefer a clean, unique identifier and match on that whenever we can, right?
Yeah.
But inevitably, there's a subset where no shared key exists, and we fall back to fuzzy matching. And they give a great example. These are all the same film. Star Wars, Star Wars A New Hope, Star Wars Episode 4, Star Wars Episode 4 A New Hope, and Star Wars Episode 4 A New Hope, but with a colon instead of a dash. How do you think about provenance for that use case, where the source isn't one clean origin, but a similarity score?
Yeah.
Do you
So
treat the match logic itself as part of the lineage? So, yes, great question, Heidi Lynn. Thank you.
okay. So I have tackled that problem my entire career, and I don't have a magic bullet for you, but I was also one of the initiators for the legal entity identifier, which is part of the financial industry. John Bottega and I wrote the initial paper for that to jumpstart that because we had 140 banks, at least at the time, that all had the name City National. How do I know which City National Bank I'm talking about? And I like to use the example of Linda Powell. There's a lot of me.
Yeah.
If you Google Linda Powell, you're going to get the number one hit is an actress, and it's not me. And you're hard pressed to find me. I'm way down there in the Google hit searches. But the IRS always finds me. They have my security number.
Yes.
They know how to find me. So I've dealt with it. One, by trying to fix the financial industry infrastructure by creating unique persistent identifiers. That's always critical. But two, when you don't have a unique persistent identifier, you kind of have to start with the fuzzy matches. I'm a big fan of crowdsourcing. If you put your fuzzy matches out there and you pay people to verify that it's correct or it's wrong, you often get really good results for not a lot of money. I love the crowdsourcing. And the other is I have, especially when I was at the Fed, we created our own internal matching databases, which I will say during the financial crisis were beyond value
Yeah.
because we didn't have months to put together matching databases. We had minutes to do the analysis. So being proactive, and if you know you're going to need some specific identifiers matched across time. There's a lot of vendors now that you can buy.
Yeah.
The data, it's often expensive, but back when I was doing it, you couldn't even buy it. We would start with fuzzy matches, verify, crowdsourcing, and we had research assistants who were
Well, now,
crowdsourcing that would make final distinctions. Um,
yeah.
yeah, it's a tough problem.
Well, Linda, I want to thank you because I got into creating a credit risk management database when counterparties were failing during the Enron.
Ah, yes.
And so I remember thinking, dude, this is obviously a matching problem and la
Yeah,
la la la. Because I was young and assumed everything was solvable. And then you and John Bottega, and I didn't know this. I didn't connect the dots, but you guys actively tried to solve it because it has to happen at an industry level,
yeah.
right?
The
And
retail industry solved it years ago with barcode.
yeah,
Years ago. And I think the big difference is in the retail industry, the profit margins are so small. There is
yeah, yeah, yeah,
they make pennies on a can
yeah,
of peas. They
yeah.
can't lose a lot of cans of peas. In the financial industry, historically, we had really large margins. So if a few trades got bungled, it wasn't the end of the world. But the margins are shrinking. And so, even in the financial industry, we need that level of precision of barcodes.
Okay. I love it. Heidi asked a really important follow up that I want to get in here. Have you landed on a preferred metadata model for provenance and lineage? This is my question too. The MVP set of attributes worth capturing on each data element. Like, what is the minimum viable set of
Hmm.
elements? And I'm thinking fields such as source system, source type, provenance level, tier, owner, transformations applied, and tying back. And so she offers a point of view and then says, have you developed your own or do you anchor to a standard like Bu3C Prov, which I've studied tiny or open lineage? Like, so there's a lot to unpack in Heidi's question. And I can't wait to meet her and find out how she thinks about it. But that's a really good question. Like, in to simplify, how do you think about modeling provenance
Yeah.
in
Well,
a yeah.
I'm going to say it depends on the.
Good
Yeah. Now,
consultant answer.
I am going to give an answer though.
Yeah.
If you're using financial data, if you're using research data, if you're using medical data, the model you want to use is going to be use case or industry specific. When I first started working in metadata, before there were a lot of metadata standards, I'm going to go way old school here,
Do it.
Dublin Core.
Okay.
Probably no one on this call has heard of Dublin Core, but it's very old school, and it was the first metadata repository I built was based on Dublin Core, and you can look it up. And
Yeah, yeah.
it's not Dublin, Ireland; it's Dublin, Ohio. It was where it was created.
Nice. Oh my God. I love Ohio
It
for
was a bunch of data librarians who got together and created the metadata standard. There was another metadata standard that I used to use a lot, mostly geared towards economic time series data, but that is much more niche. I have used a lot of the standard products now
yeah,
are often based on a standard. I used Calibra at a couple
yeah.
of institutions. Fine product. I don't know what standard they're based on, but they have a methodology built into it that if you follow their model, it works very nicely. Other industries would have different models. So I think the key is just pick a model. Pick a
Yeah.
model that works for your industry and stick with it.
Yeah. Okay. So I love it. Linda, this has been a pleasure. Like I said at the beginning, I love talking about this stuff, provenance and lineage, and I can't wait to bring you back and let's crack open metadata or
I love
anything else.
talking about metadata.
I know, so do we. All of us data nerds are happy to talk about it. So, but we're at time. I just want to thank you. I uh, post this as soon as we can. Any parting words? Let's maybe tell people how they can reach you, and I'll put that in the show notes too.
Oh,
What's the
sure.
best way to reach the Linda Powell?
Oh, I'm
The
on
right
LinkedIn.
Oh,
That's an easy way to get me. So
okay.
yeah. And I guess my parting words are
Yes.
just know where you get your data from. Always ask the question. Someone sends you a report. Oh, where'd this come from?
And silence. Thank you, Linda.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Bye.